I would like to welcome everyone to Driving Efficiencies Through Effective Planning and Budgeting with SharePoint 2010. I'd like to introduce today's presenter, Anand Pandya, who's a Services Manager for the GNet Group. And with that, Anand, you now have the floor.
Thank you very much, Craig. I also want to welcome everybody for joining our webcast today. Again, my name is Anand Pandya. I'm the Services Manager for GNet down in our South Central District. For those of you on the line who are down in Dallas melting as well, I'm right here with you. So we're just going to go ahead and jump right in as people join in as they come. Hopefully they'll be able to catch up with us. From a general overview of what we're going to cover today, we'll give a brief introduction to GNet Group, who we are, what we do, some of our capabilities. Then we'll talk about the planning, budgeting, forecasting process and processes on the whole. We'll get into Microsoft's SharePoint application platform and the Office 2010 and Business Intelligence Stack. We'll talk about a case study we have out there with the Wilder Foundation in Minnesota. And then we'll get into what is new in the version 2 of our planning and budgeting framework, show a brief demonstration of the overall features, and then really open the floor for some questions and answers. Before we get started, I just want to get a quick view of who all's on the phone. So if you could take a brief moment and click and let us know what role you play in your organization, finance, accounting, IT, executive management, or other. If there's multiple people on the phone kind of broadcasting in a conference room, just give me a majority vote. Give folks a couple of moments here. All right, looks like we've got a fair balance between finance and IT, so I won't go too far technical and won't go too far away from technical either. I'll try and play this one right down the middle. So let's say we get going. So GNet Group is a managed gold certified partner. We're focused on empowering data-driven strategies. Really, what we like to think of is that every organization on the planet has an overall strategy. All those strategies have business processes that need to be executed to achieve that strategy. Each one of those business processes involves data capture and ultimately generating new data. So the question is, how do you track all those data points and ultimately decide how that measures the success of the overall business process and strategy? It's that kind of strategic thinking that has led us to become a leading provider of Microsoft Business Intelligence and SharePoint solutions. We've delivered over 175 projects across multiple verticals, geographies, company sizes, and competencies. We've been leveraged by Microsoft's Global Center of Excellence. We're a recognized provider, leading provider of development, and we were finalists this year for the Global Business Intelligence Partner of the Year. Our headquarters is up in Minneapolis, St. Paul. Our local office is in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. If you are a Twin Cities area around the Interstate 35, we have an office, basically. Our offshore development center is in Pune, India, that caters to our global clientele as well as supporting our custom application development practices in the United States. So before we jump right into the planning, budgeting, forecasting world, I want to take one step back and just look at the general temperature of business processes. I want to talk about some of those processes that are crucial to really every organization, but aren't necessarily systematically driven. So you think a lot of the forms kind of processes. They're significant, but they're not really big enough to live inside of ERPs or line of business systems. Think HR onboarding, change control type committees in the IT world, approval queues for travel, for time, for expenses. When you're really looking at some of these processes, you're really thinking how manually intensive they are. How many forms have you filled out? What type of forms were they? Were they literally pen to paper? Were they just a Word document that was set up a certain way, an Excel document set up a certain way? How flexible are those forms? Given the actual form contents, do you have to adjust an entire form? Can you just change smaller things? Can you adjust workflows on the fly? So it's not just the form itself, but it's who are they going to, who approves it, where does it go if this person's not in the office? From a data perspective, how is that data captured? How is that retained from a smart perspective? Is it able to validate the data being entered? From an integration perspective, if you're a company that has several different departments, several different companies, several different segments, how are you able to integrate the data across all those to get a holistic view but also kind of not lose the forest and the trees, and kind of the converse, lose the trees and the forest. It's something to think about, that these are really crucial elemental business processes that often aren't taken care of in the right way, and that leads to some really inefficient tendencies. So when you're looking at the pains of some of those inefficient processes, they stack up over time. And time is really one of the biggest factors that we're talking about. You know, it's the old standard that time is money. And in this case, you got to ask, where's the time going? Is the time left in filling out forms? Is it the time to validate forms? Is it the manual handoff and submission process? You know, you're validating forms, you're transposing forms, you have to iterate it again, you have to validate it again. So in the data validation process, how much is the actual workflow value being generated, the real business processes versus just, for lack of a better term, paper pushing? And when you look at the process itself, what's your visibility into what's going on? What's causing bottlenecks? What's causing stalls? You know, who is doing what? Where are we? I asked for this a week ago. What happened? You know, the fun little term we like to coin called the form graveyard. If I don't, out of sight, out of mind. If this form came to me and it was my job and it fell to the bottom of my inbox, somebody sent it at the end of the day on a Tuesday. By the time I walked in Wednesday, I had a stack of emails on top of it. I never got it. Out of sight, out of mind. It just went away. And then back to kind of that multiple integrated environment. When you have this form, when you have this set of data, where does it go? What systems does it go into? What system did it come from? How do I report on this? Am I creating more silos of information than I need to create? That's really processes in general. And when you get to an extremely critical process, that planning, budgeting, and forecasting process, it's kind of a classic example of all those pains wrapped into one. I mean, you guys are muted, but I can hear it on the phone. Just the mention of that annual planning and budgeting process sends shivers down your spine. I mean, in some cases, we wrapped the P&B process up last quarter. We haven't even had time to think about it, and we already have to get the table set for next year in just a few months now. Forget forecasting. We just have to spend so much time in planning and validating and moving things across and manually moving things around. The quality goes away. It costs too much from a time perspective, from a resources perspective. They're not flexible. We're dependent on folks who really know Excel really well. They're those Excel Jedis, Excel magicians. We have a guy we like to call Ray, who's a representative of this type of guy at our client, who just knows macros and VLOOKUPs so well that if he were to win the lottery tomorrow, it could sink an entire organization. Those are the people that, do you really want them analyzing, or do you want them knowing Excel really well? From a workflow perspective, how many of you have that special folder in Outlook that handles this, that ultimately leads to that form graveyard problem? And then if you're looking at Excel, itself, and I'm not meaning to rag on Excel. I know that doing that to finance people is like, calling your child ugly. It's not allowed. And Excel is good, I promise you. But when you get to the file management part of it, you'll notice sometimes you see the prefixes and suffixes, version X, edited by Y, reviewed by so-and-so, this is the final copy, use this one. And when you're looking at this in a hierarchical perspective, it causes more clutter than it's worth. And it's just kind of that headache that should be a really exciting time for a firm when it comes to planning and budgeting. And in talking about the process, there's really 6 drivers that need to be held in check when focusing on this process and really making it effective. First being alignment. It's, from a very basic perspective, being able to align multiple GLs, multiple charts of accounts, trying to integrate all these things together, standardize them across the board. And then from a larger context, being able to align corporate goals and objectives with operational plans and execution. If you can't do that, then you're missing the boat all the way around. To really make it effective, it needs to be predictable. Now more than ever in the uncertain, economy, companies have got to gain more accuracy in their forecasts and their plans and their budgets regarding all the revenues, all the expenses, to really predict where are the market opportunities and where do we really best allocate our resources. It's not a matter of looking at the forest, it's looking at the trees, it's looking at the weeds, and being able to keep everything in check together. Consistency. It's one thing to hit it on the mark now and then miss it later. You know, the market moves quickly, and decision makers have to be sure that what they're basing the decisions on are really the right sets of information. And financial and operating plans have got to be based on consistent assumptions that when I'm looking at things, I know what's happening and I can trust these numbers. Based on that, it's about transparency. You know, the more you need to know what decisions are being made, how they're being made, who's making them, not just into the actual decisions, but the workflow. I need this today. Who has it? Where is it in the process? What's going on? Immediacy. We talked about speed being a factor. We talked about it as a factor of consistency, but from a velocity perspective, you need to be able to make those decisions quickly. Having your information 2 quarters too late is just that, too late. It's about being quick and being able to have the work you're doing be productive and not just menial tasks. Have it be done in a timely fashion to enforce the right information, the right place, the right time, to the right people. Finally, automation. All these things are great, but if you still have to manually enter a bunch of stuff on a piece of paper and then transpose it here and then move it here and then fill out this Excel spreadsheet and fill out this piece, it's not really doing much for you. If you have to send all these emails left to right, manage all these files, it's kind of turning the rest of those 5 factors into mush, if you will. So all these pieces have to work together to really make the planning and budgeting and forecasting process effective and efficient and productive for you. So I want to take a quick step back and kind of ask the audience how you guys are currently managing your FP&A process. Are you using Microsoft Excel and Outlook kind of, not necessarily to the effect that we laid out, but in some extent, are you really running this via Excel and Outlook? Do you guys have other systems that kind of handle the bulk of the entire FP&A process? Is it a mixture? Is it, you know, we spent all this money on Hyperion planning, but inevitably all of our analysts want to pull it down to Excel anyway. So, you know, we kind of have this dual process going on. In some cases, you just may not be sure what's going on. You know what you use, but you're not sure how the organization as a whole uses it. So it looks like a fair amount of you either purely have your process built in Excel and Outlook or use a mixture of kind of other systems in tandem with Excel and Outlook. So I want to use this opportunity from a systems perspective to really talk about the Microsoft stack and where it stands today. The Microsoft application platform, a lot of you might have seen this image in some way, shape, or form. Really, you know, applications are, for lack of a better definition here, they're the bridges between the business processes itself and the IT department's management of data stewardship. You know, the application platform is really the set of capabilities that help you better, you know, get the most value from the applications. And it's really built on these 3 layers, or 4 layers. There's the infrastructure layer, which is really the foundation piece around core security, identity access, networking, really the paint, power, and pipes and gateways. From a database perspective, that's pretty straightforward. The database layer uses those infrastructure services to store and retrieve and provide analysis on application data. The middle tier is really where you store and provide a lot of that business logic and integration and standardization pieces so that these applications work in tandem with each other and other databases. From a top-level perspective, then there's the applications themselves. These are obviously how you're using them in a packaged fashion with the larger kind of ERPs, LOBs. There's the custom, we built it in-house. There's the web-based tools, all kind of working together to create that application platform. How Microsoft does this in a nice, cleanly standard, stacked, and integrated piece is delivered kind of through all the elements that you're accessing this information, your PC, phone, tablets, browser, wherever it might be, and being able to surface all these things in, you know, totally on-premise, in a cloud, or in some sort of hybrid structure really lets Microsoft provide all these things in an integrated platform to create the best experience for users and managers and developers all the way across. Diving a little bit deeper into SharePoint, really what we're focusing on today is going to be the composites layer. Now, SharePoint in and of itself can do a lot of different things, and looking at this little what I like to call trivial pursuit slide, really shows the breadth of what SharePoint can do. We're going to focus on the composites piece. And composites are really solutions created on top of SharePoint components to create really robust business and collaborative solutions without the need of a really in-depth custom application coding exercise. It's about empowering business users and decision makers without kind of abandoning IT standards and stewardship and security. It's about, engaging in dynamic solutions without waiting on somebody, tapping your fingers for 6 months waiting for something to be created from custom code. SharePoint really enables users, decision makers, and IT to enable innovation and really improve productivity and streamline a lot of those process elements that we were talking about at the beginning of the presentation. So want to take another point here and kind of get a feel for from folks what version of SharePoint is currently being used in your organization. Is it the newer versions in SharePoint 2010, the cloud versions with Office 365, version last, which was 2007, prior versions, or if you're not sure if you've got SharePoint in-house? It's like a majority of you are kind of SharePoint 2010, SharePoint 2007. A couple folks aren't really sure, but that's good. What we'll be showing you is SharePoint 2010, but it is SharePoint 2007 capable. There's much more capability, much more robust and integration and optimization in 2010. That's for a later discussion. Next question, really want to get a feel for what version of Office is being used in your organization. Is it the most recent with Office 2010, version prior in 2007, or is it before, or are you one of those few and far between shops that doesn't even use Office? And they do exist. Okay, so it looks like a majority of you are on either 2007 or 2010. This helps us just from a general feel for where that kind of Microsoft application platform fits and what Office tools you'll have access to. So when we're showing the demo, we can kind of refer to InfoPath and InfoPath Form Services and how that integrates into SharePoint. So where we've been leading to is GNet Group's planning and budgeting framework. This was something that was initially built at one of our customers in Minnesota, the Wilder Foundation. The Wilder Foundation works in Minnesota to really help at-risk children and family and seniors with different community programs, with decreasing revenue and increasing costs and ultimately fewer resources. Wilder was really forced to take a closer look at how the sensitivity of their expenses were directly affecting the bottom line. And they have an extremely granular planning and budgeting process. And they really felt that as they grew and resources shrunk, that granular process was taking too long and ultimately losing the forest in the trees. Their existing tools and processes weren't meeting those complex needs. In fact, managers and analysts spent literally days on weeks on low-value activities like data consolidation and reconciliation and integration, ad hoc report creation, and really best guess analysis. We're all familiar with that, where it's, I guess this is right, and I'll guess it's right until somebody tells me otherwise. It really led to the fact that creating their fiscal year budget required almost 3 months of purely entering and manipulating data. So it wasn't so much analyzing data, it wasn't so much getting access to information and learning from it strategically. It was really just the blocking and tackling tasks of entering and manipulating data. By implementing our solution, their process was trimmed down to weeks, and they were able to become much more agile, much more flexible, much more focused. Keeping those 6 things we reviewed before is really the keys to an effective planning and budgeting process. Those are able to really be focused on and realized, so that now the capabilities of what they have with planning and budgeting allows them to be much more analytical, much more accurate with what they're planning, so that they can set themselves up for a more productive year and ultimately for what they do provide a much more greater service to the community. with what they have. What is this planning and budgeting solution exactly? Well, you'll see just from a very high-level perspective, the architecture is a very standard architecture. You'll see from a source system perspective, we integrate with existing budget source systems and other source systems that might pertain to the process, HRISs, line of businesses, systems, being able to integrate that information so we're not just kind of recreating recreating the wheel or creating multiple control points. We want to integrate where we can and make that process more efficient. That middle tier that we were talking about, from a database perspective, you have the application database, which handles the actual forms and workflow process along with SharePoint. And then from a report and analytics perspective, to really drive home the idea of performance management, you have the traditional BI elements of a staging, ODS, data mart, and queue. From a front end, what are people interacting with? Well, for lack of a better term, you're interacting with your browser. From a forms perspective, from the reports perspective, from a dashboard perspective, you're interacting with your browser. So it's not as though it's a heavy install. It's not as though it's a heavy learning perspective. It's a very straightforward browser-based tool. See one question already in the pipeline that I think fits kind of to answer right now. You know, where does Excel fit in? Again, Excel is a very versatile tool when it's used the right way. Excel fits into our solution from a analysis tool, from a self-service analysis tool, from almost a sandbox tool. And we'll show you how the tool looks here shortly in the demonstration and kind of where Excel can be used to really make the best of the entire process and the tools that you have. So I hope that answered that question. As I mentioned, we have just released version 2 of our planning and budgeting solution. So I wanted to highlight a couple things that are new in V2. First of all, we have new interfaces that make it look a little bit more efficient, more clean. What we'll be showing you is a very sample implementation. It's meant to be easily configured and really skinned to your organization and standards. We have new configurations really empowering the business users, as we talked about with what SharePoint enables via composites, empowering the business users to really own their own solution without straying from IT best practices and standards. So being able to better handle budgets and scenarios, being able to better configure and handle email and workflow rules, being able to handle much more tighter security and access. We have new modules. So you'll see that I'll show you what the original modules were and some of the new ones around being able to have a GUI, a user interface on the approvals queue and really do a better job of managing what you need to approve and how to approve it, as well as a new forecasting module that allows you to do that intra-year forecasting process. As well, we have some new reports and dashboards available around those forecasts, being able to create your income statement right out of the tool, as well as some dashboards around both the planning view across the year, as well as some comparison and performance dashboards around how you're doing within the year. So with that, we will jump right into the demonstration. So if you have any issues with your screen, I believe you can hit F5, and that will put you in a full screen view. What you're looking at right here is really the front page of our application. You'll notice here it's welcoming me by using SharePoint and direct user profile services and the integration with Active Directory and role-based security. The application automatically knows who I am and what role I play. Now, as an administrator, I have access to the entire application, so I can see the advanced settings. And for those of you familiar with SharePoint, you'll see this is a SharePoint page. You'll see your library list here and some other lists and some other capabilities around it to drive home that sites and collaborations feature. You'll notice that the administration pieces are all links that are active for me. If I had logged in and I was an analyst or a developer, I may not, or just an approver or reviewer, these administration links would be grayed out and I would not have access to them. So if we're looking at the application and we focus on kind of administration and configuration, first place we want to go is the configuration piece. Now from here, this is where an FP&A administrator could really configure the application to represent your organization's FP&A process. This can be as deep a configuration piece as it needs to be. So from that standpoint, if you don't have a lot of budget source systems and you need this tool to really drive and maintain the process, it can handle a lot of the different pieces from, budget and scenario management, so being able to set up your fiscal year, set up the different budgets, set up intra-year scenarios, forecasts, 6 by 6, whatever the case might be. You can set up your accounts here. So if we were integrating with several different charts of accounts, several different GLs, whatever the case might be, you can use this accounts configuration screen as a method to standardize and really integrate accounts across the board. You can tie them to default distribution spreads and categories. You can create different account structures and handle the versions. You can associate accounts, so in that case of being able to integrate, standardize, this allows you to really drive that home via the tool, as well as create and maintain different structures. Same thing with companies and units. This is a sample implementation. So if you wanted to configure things, and maybe you guys do your planning and budgeting around sales or salespeople or sales region or by product or by service, any of these pieces can easily be built, and that's one of the beauties of the tool and of the SharePoint and Office stack in the modularity and customizability of the pieces. We also have a copy data module here that allows you to basically take a prior scenario and copy data forward and seed a new scenario. We'll talk about that in a much more direct fashion. So from here, you also have the ability to create and maintain different codes and different business rules. So in this case, I might want to create different job codes, different distribution spreads. User configuration is really a security type tool. Who gets to access what departments, what job codes. The workflow configuration piece allows you to set different email rules and workflow rules based on what module you're looking at. So you can create a new rule, very straightforward, tied back into your Active Directory system that allows you to choose people, basically say when so-and-so adds or makes a change to any of our modules or any of the forms, based on what change they make, I want to email this person, copy this person, here's the subject that comes across. This is a very straightforward interface, a very straightforward configuration. This is very easily customizable to however your organization or hierarchy might be. See, it's a very direct flow of the application to come back to the main screen. If we're looking at the actual application itself, you start by going in and selecting the budget you have selected. So I'm going to go back into our FY 2011. What this is basically doing when it's bringing up the different modular forms here, so you'll see there's three. There's the capital items form, which allows you to handle CapEx planning and budgeting. There's the workforce planning form, which is exactly as it sounds, being able to handle your employees, and then the revenue expense module, which is much more of your traditional chart of accounts planning and budgeting. So here we're looking at the CapEx form that allows me to, again, you'll see I can select different companies. I can select different departments within those companies. You can define these hierarchies however you see fit. So again, if you have more of a product or services or salesperson, sales region model, it's a very straightforward configuration. You'll see from a target perspective, this would be the total budget allocated for your department and your company. So again, keeping that idea of a granular process, but not losing that forest in the trees. I see some questions being stacked up. I have some time towards the end that I'm going to be addressing those, so I don't want you to think I'm ignoring you. And you can see from a very straightforward perspective, all the pieces for a CapEx elements are here. So I can see the existing elements that exist for my department. I can see, the asset classes they belong to, what is the depreciable life, what is the amount, is it in my asset management system? I can define rules as they pertain to these things. Is this a purchase date? Is this a in production date? What does that represent? Carrying over depreciation from the prior year. When I hit edit, you'll see certain pieces get grayed out, certain places turn to yellow. The yellow fields are the ones I can edit. The other ones are more fields that are affected by what I edit. So I'll come back to that. You'll see I have direct links to relevant reports as they pertain to the modules. So again, that allows me to see those line items as they pertain to the whole. I have a sneeze brewing, so if I just kind of pause or make a weird noise, I apologize. So from here, we can jump to our workforce planning module. And this, you can see, maintains the same look and feel. And the look and feel is completely customizable to really your needs, your organization, your standards. You'll notice from the the workforce planning module, it's a very granular perspective to really lay out the fully burdened cost of an employee. I can see within a department that same idea of keeping the overall budget allocation there. I can lay out employees, first name, last name, job codes, GL codes, ratings. These are all based on business rules that I've configured in the application that allow me to pre-calculate what is the fully burdened cost of an employee. As well, within the tool, I can do department allocations. So if you have a services firm or a liaison type role and you need to share that cost across multiple departments, it's something I can easily create and set up. I don't have to maintain different spreadsheets or VLOOKUP functions and linking all these things together. I can plan for salary changes throughout the year, really have the flexibility I need to have to maintain this. From a security perspective, this is one of the first questions we get, and that is, how secure is this, given that we are talking about some really sensitive information? We encrypt our databases all the way through. We secure them so the only people who can access them are properly authorized admins. That's shielded from however you define that security model as to how you see fit. There's accessing the network, accessing the application, accessing modules, accessing departments, accessing data. It's a multi-tiered security model to fit your standards and sensitivities and regulatory needs if they see fit. So from here, we can jump to the revenue expenses module, which is, again, a more traditional module around taking that same company department, only now we're looking at the chart of accounts perspective. So I can see, looking back at my financial services department, I can see my chart of accounts that's been integrated across however many systems I've integrated. I can see professional salaries. This is driven from a roll-up from that workforce planning module. I can see what was my budget in the prior year, what's going to finish this year, what was last year's costs, what are the variances. Here's where I can actually see the spread for the entire year. I can see the periodic spread. I can quickly edit this, so I can edit what I think is going to finish the prior year as well as what's going to happen in the next year. I can change the distribution types that are there, so I can maybe move this to, we'll make it quarterly as to why we pay our salaries quarterly. I don't know. I'm just showing you. I can easily, hit submit. It's going to interact with that application database on the back end, reconfigure, redistribute over the periods, and it's recalculating that full amount for the year. And now I can see exactly how that is spread across my quarters. You'll also notice you're not restricted to calendar year. You can set up whatever fiscal year you want to set up. From a plan perspective, if you want to see 18 months instead of 12, it's really your organization's customizations and prerogatives that we can set up. One of the aspects of our tool that really sets it apart from others is, unlike a lot of tools out there where you have to adapt your process to the tool because it is very straightforward and that's what it does, we can adapt our tool to your process. It's very modular in nature. It's very customizable in nature. We can adapt it to your processes, streamline those processes, make them more efficient, and you're not going to be waiting a year and a half for that to be done. This is something we can do in a relatively quick fashion. You can also hear from kind of that, again, being able to consolidate information and manage content in a much more direct manner. You can attach your budget narratives right here within the same form rather than adding a comment or adding a link to a doc somewhere on your file share. It's all tightly bound and encompassed in this tool as you see fit. So that's just kind of a quick walkthrough of some of the actual planning and budgeting elements. So if we're going back to the home page, you'll notice that I talked about the copy data and scenario configuration pieces. Say we set up our plan for FY 2011, and then at the end of Q2, we want to do our Q3 forecast. So I can easily use that copy data module, seed my Q3 forecast with either the plan for the year or the forecast for the prior forecast I did, and copy those information pieces over. I'd set an effective date so that I know that, okay, this forecast begins, in our case it would begin January 1st, and the system will only copy forward January through June. Because July through December are actuals, the integration to your actual system, be it an actual systematic capture or be it, we have an Excel spreadsheet that we capture our actuals in, or a CRM or some sort of point-of-sale roll-up. Whatever the case might be, we can capture that information and automatically seed it. So if I'm looking at professional salaries in the financial services department, that might not be the best option. Let's look at something a little bit better that might have. So we'll look at dental insurance. So when I click edit, you'll notice I cannot edit July through December because those are fixed actuals. So now I'm starting to control some of these data validity and quality standards are now being controlled by the form in the process. As well, from a forecasting perspective, you can create a little bit of kind of foundational elements to more smarter forecasting that's coming in future versions. I can apply some flat growth and decline percentages, so I can recalculate on the fly. Now, I want to say that over the next half of the year, I'm going to see a 10% growth in my budget. By doing that, it's going to go back into that tool. It's going to recalculate that for the year, as well as redo the spread based on the distribution that I've selected. So I submit that. Oh, excuse me. I know you guys can't talk back, but you ever had a sneeze that just sits right in your nose and just won't go away? I'm having that right now. So you can see that that's automatically been respread. So I'll go ahead and back that out. And again, you have that same look and feel. You can add comments based on forecasts that you create. So now I did this because I think this is going to happen. I'm getting better dental insurance, and GNet's paying for it. I hope my boss is on the line. So I can add that, and it's going to show up in that approval queue. So how do I maintain approvals? By simply going to the application and clicking on the approvals link, it'll bring me to a whole new user interface where now I, as a manager, can start maintaining my approval queue in a much more straightforward fashion, as opposed to an email inbox that is just going to be stacked forth, with a bunch of different things. Now I have a direct UI that I can go to that's organized, that tells me, based on the module that I put forth, what do I need to approve. I can select, employee information. I can select multiple pieces that I know, and I don't need to worry about it, and I can just approve them in bulk. Select, approve and save, and it'll go in there. It updates the tool on the back end, and those will disappear from my queue. This number will go down. This will be updated. I can actually see this specific line item if I want to break into it and actually see what is the breakout. And I can say, John works 80 biweekly hours. He's going to be a full-time. I can reject that. That immediately kicks off different workflows based on what I've selected to kick that back to my analysts so they know what needs to be done to be fixed accordingly. And that would disappear from my queue and now be handled. From a visibility and accountability standpoint, it's all being tracked. It's all being maintained on the back end. So that's kind of a quick walkthrough, some of the different modules that are available to be deployed in your organization. From a reporting and dashboarding perspective, I mentioned there were several different reports across the different forms, and you can see that, and you can access those directly as well by clicking on those report links. So in this case, the application reports, you have a nice title and description is actually, what are we looking at? So that depreciation by department, I can click that, and it's based on reporting services, so it kind of it takes advantage of the SQL Server stack behind it. I can select which of those budget worlds I'm looking at, which company I'm looking at. It maintains that same hierarchy throughout. I can select my financial services. I can choose to include or exclude the unapproved items. So if I'm looking at it from an analyst perspective and I want to see everything I've done, be it approved or not, just kind of pick up where I left off, I can quickly run this report, see for this department or set of departments, here's where everything is. From an administrative standpoint, I have access to a list of reports that'll kind of give me an idea of how I've configured my application, as well as any kind of audit reporting that needs to be done. These are also locked down from a security standpoint that only administrators could actually access this, or whatever designated role you saw fit to do so. And then finally, I know I want to leave enough time for questions. That queue was getting a bit large. Finally, there's a dashboard access here where we can really take all of these CPM concepts and build very direct dashboards that allow you to see what does the plan look like for the year based on the prior year actuals. This is a very, very straightforward, very simple dashboard. There's really nothing to this. But I can create as many dashboards as I want. I can create departmental dashboards, different views, different visualizations, different capabilities from the Microsoft tool set. So that's really a very quick look at our planning budgeting framework and a very sample implementation. Again, that can be customized to your heart's content or to your organization's content. So I'm going to take a quick one more slide to kind of let you guys in on a couple different links you can take a look at. If you go to the GNet Group website, you'll find the links to the Wilder Foundation case study, as well as to our blog, where we'll kind of keep you updated on future versions, what's going on, what's happening next, what's in development with this and some of our other frameworks. But you can go to our website, get a feel for some of our cases, some of our services that are out there from a Microsoft perspective. Go to sharepoint.microsoft.com. You can learn more about the SharePoint stack today, where it's going tomorrow, as well as the Office InfoPath forms that really drive that forms experience. So with that, I want to get to our question and answers section. So please feel free to submit questions. We have quite a few in the queue right now. So let me get to them. So can you plan all accounts at one time for a given department? If that's how you want that interface to look, then we can create that accordingly. So really, if you didn't want a extremely granular process that allows you to go account by account and do it that way, and you wanted more of a kind of spreadsheet look or feel, for lack of a better term of saying it, where I can see all of my accounts down a column, down a row, and kind of the months spread out, maybe a total feel to it. The forms and the modules are meant to be customized for you. So if that's how you wanted to do it, that could be done in a more kind of bulk fashion, or in a line item fashion, and a bottom up, top down approach. That's really for you to define to us as to how you want it to be customized. So the simple answer to the question is yes. The more in-depth question is going to be really how do you want that to look, and how do you want that to interact, so that we can go from there. What size organization is this targeted at? Really, any size. This can be, again, part of that idea of it being modular, it being customizable, it being readily available, is really what makes it flexible for any size organization. We have an ongoing project right now where an extremely large customer that has got several locations across the United States and Canada is planning on replacing Hyperion with this tool because of its flexibility to their process, because of its capability to be deployed In a top-down approach, in a federated and corporate model, being able to adjust accordingly, we're also deploying a small just the revenue expense module at a very small firm. So really, it's small, large, and everything in between. Can revenue or expense line items be calculated using drivers such as statistical counts rather than direct entering these numbers? Yes. Again, you have the ability to define the business rules that you would want. To the degree of if you wanted to use data mining and that type of level of statistical analysis to be applied and spread for you or forecasted for you or calculated for you, whatever those drivers are, whatever those business rules are, that can happen. That can be put back into the model and back into the queue, and really from a configuration perspective, it's a matter of sitting down and defining, okay, how does this rule get applied? Where does it fit in the model so that it can be applied accordingly and really empowered to your end to be able to A, configure it, and then B, apply it. Have you had any experience working and or integrating with SAP? So really the way we treat our integration pieces is we try and take what I will call a non-intrusive route. So from an integration perspective, really the way we're looking at it is being able to extract the core data elements from those source line of business or ERP level systems and being able to bring those into this particular framework, letting you drive some of the control and configuration elements from those enterprise systems and letting it flow into this application to drive kind of the planning, budgeting process and integration and standardization within this stack. So the integration perspective of an SAP, we don't have any cases right out of the gate that we've done, but it'd be a matter of understanding, okay, what particular modules are you using, Duet, how is all the pieces being integrated together on SAP side so that we can identify what are the elements there. In the kind of engagement and implementation process, we know what data points we need to extract. It's just a matter of doing a quick data profile to say, okay, this is where those are being stored in the back-end tables. So it depends on, do you have SAP sitting on Oracle? Do you have SAP sitting on SQL? How is that being driven so that we can properly identify the right integration services, ETL packages to get to that back end and ultimately extract and surface the data. Hosting. Can you guys host a solution if we choose not to? Well, that's a very straightforward question. Yes, we can. We can host a solution for you. The way we host is, we have our data center partner that we can host a dedicated server that, again, would be secured to the hilt as far as you needed it to be secured. And we can host it in our data center and turn that into an OpEx charge as opposed to a full-blown CapEx charge. It's really going to be kind of an upfront assessment we would do to really gauge what your needs are, what your readiness is, and if that's something that you'd like to entertain, if that's something we can do for you, that's definitely something we would be happy to look further into. Okay, so I've got a couple more questions coming in. A couple of these are repeats. What version SharePoint do we need to have? So what you saw was SharePoint 2010. It is the best in class right now, and it has the best features and has the most capability around integration via business connectivity services and the direct integration with InfoPath form services and the web services required to really effectively talk back to our application database. However, this was initially built using SharePoint 2007, SQL Server 2005. So if you are still on those elements, then it can still be deployed in your organization. However, to really get the benefits and the optimization and the security and the capability, we really would recommend kind of looking at and evaluating upgrading into SharePoint 2010 and the Office 2010 stack. Can I still use Excel? Yes. Yes, you can still use Excel. As I mentioned before, Excel has been made much more powerful in Excel 2010 and what it's capable of doing. What we really want to reinforce with this is that I know trying to take, like I said, trying to take Excel out of the equation is impossible, and I don't recommend taking Excel out of the equation. What I recommend is using Excel in a much more empowered and smarter fashion. What that really means is, rather than trying to manage the entire process and millions of rows of data and tons of analysis and linking several spreadsheets together and trying to make it work and handling versioning, instead what I recommend is Excel being empowered for you in a self-service mentality, being able to use that to do your forecasts however you need to do them, positioning things how you need to do them to get the information you want by really having free access to those numbers, and then using our tool as more of the final step to centralize, standardize, and integrate with the organization as a whole. So driving that alignment, driving that automation, driving those pieces together. As well, from an analytics perspective, if you want a real more powerful self-service business intelligence feel, then using Excel 2010 and using Power Pivot on top of that really kicks that up a notch to enable you to do that self-service analysis on the back end so that you can really drive a much more rich corporate performance management experience. So I'll kind of give you guys a couple seconds to think of any other questions. Ask and I shall receive. Do you recommend administration rests in the IT or finance department? You know, Hyperion administration rests with finance normally. And traditionally administration does live in finance because they are kind of traditionally the administrators of the process. And this is really no different than that. What we do recommend is almost a dual administration perspective. And what I mean by that is the actual process, the actual structures. So, you know, as we were looking at those configuration forms before, being able to manage the account codes, being able to manage organizational structure, being able to manage the fiscal year attributes, being able to manage all those configuration pieces, being able to maintain all that and maintain the application, maintain those workflows, and all those pieces of the process and the actual business drivers, that should be really maintained and administered by the finance department, in tandem with IT administering the security and stewardship of the data behind it, being able to maintain the optimization and performance of the application in SharePoint. So it's really the two working together to kind of deliver and administer the entire application as a whole. So it doesn't just rest wholly in one or the other. And it is very clearly defined, so you're not going to have that situation where, you know, you're pointing fingers at each other saying, well, that's your job. You know, it's a very clear line as to what is what is maintained and administered by finance versus what is maintained and administered by IT. But it is really a cohesive relationship. And let's see if I can come up. Yeah, let's go buzzwordy on this one. It's a much more synergistic relationship between the two to really make the process much more efficient and effective. So with the last couple minutes that we have, I did want to thank you all once again for attending, taking time out of your afternoon to attend our webinar, hear about GNet Group, hear about our planning budgeting framework, see the new features in version 2, and really, hopefully, think on your end how we can help to really make your planning, budgeting, forecasting process much better, much more efficient, much more streamlined, and ultimately much more valuable for you. Please feel free to visit our website, read the case studies out there, visit our blog, follow us on Twitter, follow us on LinkedIn and Facebook to learn what we've got going on, what is out there, and what we are doing. We'd love to interact with you. We'd love to have another conversation with you, find out a little bit more about what you've got going on, dive a little bit deeper into the tool, and really find out how we can effectively help you leverage SharePoint for a more effective budgeting, planning, and forecasting process. If you do have any questions, again, please feel free to shoot me a message via email, via Twitter, or to GNet Group as a whole, via Twitter or via our website. We'll be happy to interact with you. And once again, I just want to thank everybody for coming, and we really appreciate it.
All right, fantastic. Well, great job there. Again, to our attendees, please remember that you can download the piece of collateral that we do have for you in the handout section, which is located in the upper right-hand corner. The icon looks like 3 pieces of paper, one in front of the other. If you have any remaining questions or concerns, please feel free to continue submitting those, and we will address your concerns via the question and answer text window. That said, thank you again for coming out and joining us on today's call. You can now disconnect from the audio portion of today's conference.